in which unions, employers, and governments are jointly involved in governing the employment relationship?
False.
What philosophy is that?
Oh, I knew it too.
What philosophy is that?
You said what philosophy is?
Revolutionary unionism. What is revolutionary unionism? What is that? What does it propose? Is it not the radical change in the disruption of the relationship between employers and employees? Create an equal playing field, right? Then what is this one? What philosophy is this one? All right, it's homework. You will have to list out the philosophies, all four of them. All right. Number 3.
Business unionism.
Number 3, conspiracy doctrine is the legal approach holding that any union activity among a collection of individuals was ultimately aimed at restraining trade by fixing wages. True or false?
True.
True. That was also in chapter 2, in terms of the history of the union. As you may remember, that's one of the things that they began to arrest union leaders based upon, as you may remember, right? The Congress of Industrial Organizations was founded in a meeting of national unions in Columbus, Ohio.
False.
False. Where was the Congress of Industrial Unions formed?
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh when?
1935.
1935. Which one was formed in Columbus, Ohio? Which one?
Yeah, that one. It was the AFL. I think it was the American Federation.
American Federation of Labor, absolutely. All right. The American plan was a tactic used by employers, to associate unions with foreign governments. True or false?
True.
False.
Say that question again. Number 5? Number 5 is true.
The American plan was a tactic used by employers to associate unions with foreign governments.
I got that one wrong.
Remember, that was a tactic in which they tried to basically insinuate that the union members were and union organizers were communists, right? They were a socialist, right? Because they were pushing for workers' rights. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits job discrimination against employees on the basis of disability. True or false? What does Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibit?
Race.
What are the five classes? Protected classes. One is what?
Race.
Second is what?
Religion.
Sex.
Before religion.
Sex. National origin.
Race, color, right?
Oh yeah.
Race, color,
I was getting there.
national origin,
Sex.
religion,
Sex.
and sex. Five protected classes. You'll be, rest assured, you're going to see that question in some shape or form on the final exam. So you need to get that in
We have to do it in that
your
order.
mind. Number 7, if unionized, many decisions that managers previously implemented unilaterally would require consultation and negotiation with the union. True or false?
True.
It's true. And that is in section 5. Chapter 5, rather. The National Labor Relations Board acts as a referee in the process of organizing unions. True or false?
True.
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 That was from page 156. Organizing begins with an authorization card campaign and most often ends with a NLRB certifying the election results. True or false? True. Also, in chapter 5 on page 158. Blank offers employees a method for countering employers' power to unilaterally change employment conditions. Unionization. If I'm not mistaken, that was from chapter 1. The leaders of the Knights of Labor were essentially idealists who favored the use of blank in the U.S. labor movement. Arbitration. That was from chapter 2. All private sector employers and labor organizations are covered under the Blank Act. The Norris LaGuardia or what? What's that? Thank you. The Landrum-Griffin Act. Page 63.
It said or, either or.
Yeah. The blank, and blank is an industrial organization, is an industrial type union organizing public employees outside the federal government and employees in private non-profit public service organizations. What is it? American Federation of what?
State and municipal.
State what? State, county, and municipal what? Employees. Absolutely. Hopefully we'll have one of those representatives here today. The local union representing employees in the local union represents employees in what dealings with the employer? Day to day. Chapter 4. A blank campaign tries to enroll employees in the union and the unit the union seeks to represent. Authorization card campaign. Page 159. A blank is held to determine whether a majority of employees desire union representation, and if so, by which union?
Representation election. NILB.
Can I see your
What happened? What happened? I missed it. What happened? What you write?
Oh, about which union? Oh, yeah. Give me that. Nah, chill. About which union? Do they have it? He said it. That's a question. Nah, that's an extra verb. That's extra. By which union? That's just an extra verb. Yeah.
What are the three ways? What are the three ways by which employees can become union members?
They can
Organize the union to bargain.
What are the three ways in which? What are the three ways by which employees can become union members? By what? What's the first one? Organizing. That's what we're doing. The second was by what?
Join one that's already.
Join one that's already representing the employees and in the company. The third is by what?
One is required.
Required by the CBA.
They can be exactly merged by another one, right? What were the major provisions in the Landrum-Griffin Act?
Specification and guarantee of individual right of union members. Prohibits certain management and union conduct and requires union financial disclosures.
You may remember this was in the table, right?
Yep.
Correct.
Correct.
That was in chapter 3. That table right there on page 63.
Oh, it white woman and something else.
Sure.
They got a white, comma, hey.
That's why I got it wrong. I ain't never seen it. Hey, cool.
Younger, white, or woman.
Yeah.
I can see no tree.
Number 19. What is the role of the shop steward?
Work as a facilitator and mediator.
What else?
Mediator. And they represent grievance and employer and they collect dues.
So at the work unit level, stewards are elected or appointed. They police first line supervisors' compliance with the contract. That's one of the most important things. You want to make sure, again, that the steward is the person who makes sure that the contract is being fulfilled. They also represent grievance. So if there's a grievance and somebody believes that they're not being treated correctly, then the first person they go to is who?
The steward?
The union steward. They don't go to the manager, they go to the steward. And they also do what? Make sure that everybody does what? Pay their dues, right? And so that's and they also solicit participation in union activities. Very important.
Yeah.
What are the factors associated with higher rates of free riding?
Younger, white, and a woman.
No. What are the factors, not the characteristics of people who free ride?
Dang, I'm wrong. Y'all wrong too then. Why y'all laughing? What's the answer?
What are
But
the
you put a check mark.
factors? What are the factors associated? What are the factors associated with higher rates of free riding?
Yeah, I want the answer.
What y'all supposed to know?
What are the factors associated with higher rates of free riding?
What causes free riding?
My leg just got caught. It's okay.
It says factors associated with higher rates of free riding include employment in private sector in a right state, lower earnings, right? Employment in white-collar occupation, higher education level, and being a younger white or a woman.
I'm gonna need like half a point.
Factors associated with higher rates.
Can I get half a point now?
What's that?
For my answer?
What is that?
Like said, which led to like low solvency and the need to borrow money. So he said low income.
I'm sorry, what?
I said like which led to low solvency and the need to borrow money to cover operating expenses.
No, that would be coming from an employer's standpoint. That's not coming from employees.
But wouldn't that count as like low income?
No, that wouldn't be. Lower earnings is lower earnings by the employee, not by the employer.
Okay.
Extra credit. What is NAFTA?
North American Free Trade Agreement.
And what impact did it have on union membership?
Go.
It decreased union membership.
It decreased union membership. But by small level or what?
A huge
It
level.
was a large decrease.
It was a huge decrease.
I wrote that.
You didn't.
I said people started moving south of the border.
That was your answer?
I said, you American Free Trade Association. I said, people thought.
Association?
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're right.
It was that jobs start moving south of the border. Now some people left in order to take those jobs, but you missed the boat there. What are the steps needed to form a union at a workplace where no union exists? So first of all, you do what? Authorization card. Second, you do what?
Win the election.
Before the election.
You gotta get the authorization card signed.
What do you after you get the? Excuse me, everybody. This is everybody here. What's the first step of forming a union where no union exists? Authorization card. Second, after getting the authorization card is what? After getting the majority of signed, you do what? You need at least 30%, and then you do what?
You gotta take it to management, right?
And then you ask for what? You ask for what? Ask for recognition.
What's it, recognition?
545.
Thank you. If they give you recognition, then you are automatically what? Go to negotiation of a collective bargaining agreement. If they don't allow you to have a union, then you can do what?
Reach out to NLRB.
NLRB and ask for what?
Need them to.
Petition for an election.
Yeah.
Then after that you can do what? Have the election, and if you get more than 50%, then you're able to do what? Go to negotiating the collective bargaining agreement. If you don't get 50%, then what happens?
You don't get 50%.
Right.
You have to. It's like no, right? You don't get your.
You have to wait until when?
Next election.
You have to wait for a year
Yeah.
before you actually
Try again.
try again. Now again, you should be rest assured that that question is going to be manifested in some way, shape, or form in your exam. And although it was just only an extra credit, it's likely the next time this is going to be an actual exam, not extra credit, but a required question. All right. In the film In Time, what was the unit of currency?
Time.
And what are the hints or the lessons we can take from the film in order to hack the caste system?
It was if the working class can come together, they can dismantle the current caste system. Because we're talking about like
How much coalesce with the poor
So, yeah,
to make
like-
themselves feel.
all the people that weren't rich. If they come together, then they could dismantle.
Absolutely. If they come together, and also, what are some other lessons?
Yeah, I wrote some down. I wrote a lot of it.
What are some other lessons?
Some other lessons from the
Again, one is by coalescing. Another lesson is that the caste system is a method of dividing the working class, right? By telling various members of the working class that they have, more or less privileges or more or less value than the others, right? But if the working class themselves, if they not only coalesce, but if they refuse to buy in to that division, then essentially the caste system ceases to exist, right? If nobody believes it, so for example, if somebody tells you you're inferior, but everybody begins to basically treat you like you are essentially equal, then their power over you basically is eliminated.
My opinion is that in America that we have a color-based caste system.
It is. That's what we've been talking about since the beginning of the caste system that was created to divide the working class amongst what? By race. And it gave privileges to people based upon their race, as a way of dividing them, to keep them fighting against each other, as opposed to basically turning their anger towards the people who are the wealthy elite, who are exploiting them and preventing them from basically enjoying a fair share or a fair return for their labor. Right? Okay? So that was the exam. Any questions about that? All right. Well, now we are going to go to chapter 7 on union avoidance. Union avoidance. Now, who could tell me? Thank you. Chapter 7. Ms. Chompong, what is union avoidance? So, in the last chapter, we dealt with what was the method for forming unions. We talked about what were the authorization card campaign, what were the union strategies in winning certification elections, what were some of the management responses, what were the roles of the National Labor Relations Board and the National Mediation Board, and the factors that influence outcomes of elections to establish a union, right? So an underlying theme from the last class was that employers, Mrs. Chompong, are they generally going to support the union or oppose the union? I'm sorry, what? Oppose the union, right? And so in this chapter, what we're going to be discussing are the resistance, the strategies that employers use to create and maintain a union-free environment, tactics that they use to prevent union successes in organizing, the role of decertifications and deunionizing partially unionized employees or partially unionized employers, and the effects of organizational and job structuring on limiting unionization within employers, right? So, again, the question for you is, what is union avoidance?
97?
What is union avoidance?
Said chapter 7, right?
Chapter 7.
Like a union-free employment environment.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
A union-free employment environment.
Union avoidance, as you said, a union-free environment for employees to work. That's what you're saying union avoidance is? Mr. Ave, what is, in your opinion, union avoidance?
Union avoidance is different measures that a company or corporation will take to avoid unions being formed in their organization.
Absolutely. Sometimes when you, again, this subject matter is not rocket science. It's not physics. It's not differential equations. It's not even trigonometry. It's not biology. It's definitely not chemistry. All it is reading. Reading. And that's what you have to do. The name of the chapter is what, Mr. Chompong?
Union avoidance, rational strategies, and practices.
Absolutely. So again, if you read, you can see that these are things that jump out at you. All right? Thank you, Mr. Ave. So now let me ask you, what are the capitalistic and trade, well, let me first ask you this. What is the capitalistic philosophy relating to unions, Miss Achompong?
Use their resources to create mechanisms that will enable them to develop and sell goods and services in the marketplace.
555.
Thank you. And so, how do they feel about unions? What do capitalists feel generally about unions?
They will not be able to realize a positive yield.
Say they won't be able to realize a positive yield if what?
From their investments and salary? Wait.
Again, this requires you to kind of like do more than just skim. It requires you to kind of like really understand what's on the page. So my question is, what are the ideas relating to capitalism and unionism? All right, let's go. While you ponder that, what is the trade union philosophy then, Miss Achompong?
They believe that wealth is ultimately created by the workers who produce the products or deliver the services.
Exactly. And so then, what do they then feel about unions? Are they generally in support of unions, or are they opposed to trade unions?
The unions actually are large measures of success to efforts of employees.
So I'm asking you, what do they feel about unions?
They feel like they're adding value.
Adding value, right? So again, the idea that you have is you have two competing forces, right? You have the capitalists whose goal is to do what?
Make money.
Make money, increase the bottom line so they can return that money to the investors. And then on the other hand, Mr. Chompong, you have the what?
Trade
unions.
And their goals are to do what?
Pretty much bring wealth and creating by workers.
So their goal is to create wealth in the hands of the people who are actually responsible for creating that wealth, right? As opposed to the investors. And it may, to some extent, not be mutually exclusive, right? But they would like to see a more equal and just distribution of the wealth, right? They believe that the majority of the wealth should be given to who? Huh?
No, only the workers.
The workers. Because the workers did what? They created the wealth, right? The investors, they played a role also, right? But was their role active or passive? Passive. All they did was lent what? Or contributed what? Capital, which is what money is, right? They contributed resources, right? Or resources that were used to, or capital that were used to acquire the resources, and that helped the company to be able to again, organize the workers. The workers themselves put in the labor to create that wealth. And so again, in the idea of trade unionists, they believe that the workers have a greater entitlement to that wealth than do the capitalists. And that's what the dichotomy is. All right, you can have a seat. All right. Now you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Mr. Fitzgerald, you. Tell me about what the corporatist period, what was that period? And what did that involve?
From the late 1940s through the middle to the late 1970s, large U.S. employees and unions moved through a period during which unions were essentially conceded a permanent role in a tripartite employment environment involving employers, unions, and the government as reflected in public policy towards employment.
And so in that environment, was that an environment in which the unions were free to organize? Were they welcomed? What was that environment what was that environment creating? What type of environment for unions did the corporatist period create?
I guess a fruitful environment, because the productivity rose at a steady rate and wages increases. Wage increases could be financed without substantial inflationary pressure until the late 1960s and 70s, I guess.
Well, again, on the one hand, we see that the corporatist period from the 1940s to the middle of the 1970s saw a boom in unionization, right? Because the unions, the employers, and the government were all working together. And so in that, at least according to the book, productivity rose at a steady rate and wages increased without substantial inflation. But the book argues that created ultimately a inflationary environment and led employers to increasingly resist wage increases and additional unionization. And at the same time, the rate of productivity declined and the economies of other countries began to basically outpace U.S. manufacturers. So what they are suggesting is that the corporatist period, which is the one that was described in the exam, right, in which unions, employers, and governments are jointly involved in governing, they're suggesting that the corporatist idea is not sustainable, because ultimately that leads to inflationary prices. This is what they're arguing. But in fact, there are others that would argue that that's the opposite. That by having, again, unions, if the pendulum, if you will, were favoring the unions, then that would keep inflation down, because, again, everyone would have a fair shot to make money, because the workers would be able to have more capital, and then they would be pumping more capital back into the economy, because they would be, again, workers tend to spend their money at a higher clip than do the people who are the wealthy elite. So that's their argument. So again, even in the book, you can begin to see that the author has somewhat of a bias, it appears to me at least, against unions, or at least more of a corporatist, if you will, philosophy. All right? Thank you. All right, you can have a seat there, Mr. Jackson.
I got you.
I'm sorry, not Mr. Jackson. Mr. Fitzgerald. Okay, you now, Mr. Jackson. So, Mr. Jackson, tell me, what are some of the union-free approaches? What are some of the things that the companies did to, again, what is a union-free organization, first of all?
A union-free organization, basically employers in newer or more rapidly growing industries such as information technology, financial products and services, discount retailing, and personal services either had never been unionized to any extent or were experiencing many new entrants who were not unionized.
Okay, so again, a union-free organization by its definition is one which what?
Employers like newer or more rapidly growing.
No, I said by its definition, by its name, it means that they're what?
Oh, union-free.
Union-free. They don't have a union, right? And so, what are some of the doctrines that describe this type of environment?
So, like employers in like established industries, like auto and steel, were heavily unionized and faced substantial economic problems.
What type of, again, what is the type of organization that desires to operate without unions? Miss Latney.
Oh, new companies. Oh, she went to the bathroom.
Oh, okay. Do you have it?
The one like new companies entering the steel industry.
I'm looking for something else. Mr. Mason.
Oh, man, I got you. Say, come on. Hey, hold it up. To gain flexibility in the design.
Mr. Mason? What kind of organization explicitly desires to operate without union? All right, Miss Mathis. Miss Mathis is gone. Miss Mathis. What type of organization exists to operate without union?
I got
What type of organization explicitly desires to operate without unions? A doctrinaire organization, right? And how does it seek to implement human resources? How does it seek to implement human resources, human resource policies? What type of human resource policies does it seek to implement?
They mimic what unions have one similar organization to collective bargaining.
So what type of benefits do they offer their employees?
Paying wages equal to or exceeding what unions have negotiated in the industry.
So the idea, now check it. A doctrinaire organization, right, is an organization that is going to basically give its employees what employees in a unionized environment have. So, hey, you don't need a union. I'm going to basically increase your wages, right? I'm going to give you leave time. I'm going to give you some of the same things that the union would basically ensure you, and you don't have to do what?
Pay dues.
You don't have to pay dues. Isn't that great? That's what they're going to ask. All right. You can have a seat, Ms. Baptist. That's what they want to do. Right? Okay, so tell me, what does a philosophy-laden company seek to do? Thank you. Going back to you, Mr. Jackson.
All right, a philosophy-laden company has no unions, but the lack of success in organizing is because of the organization's employee relations climate. Management engages in human resource practices it believes are right. Many of the firms are included in lists of most admired employers or best places to work. They are essentially invulnerable to unionization because their employment practices are more attractive to the employees than the unions typically advocate and are able to negotiate. And the policies are evidently congruent with employee desires because union organizing activities in these firms are practically non-existent.
So tell me, what are some of the companies that you might associate with a philosophy-laden company? What are, Mr. Mason, what is an example of a philosophy-laden company? Google, right? Google. What are some of the things that they offer their employees?
I know that they don't have to wear a uniform.
In terms of, they don't have to wear a uniform, right? How about wages? Are the wages low or high?
They pay well.
High wages. In some cases, you can come out of college, right, making how much?
Probably 6 figures.
At least. In fact, if you have an artificial intelligence PhD, you can make $200,000 to $300,000 straight out of college. Right? So again, high wages, relaxed environment, right? What else?
They probably offer like stock options and stuff.
Stock options, right? In fact, I've read that some of these companies offer like paid family leave. So FMLA, we know that offers out to how many weeks of leave? 12 weeks of leave. But is that paid leave or unpaid leave? Unpaid leave. But some of these companies, they offer 12 weeks is how many months? 3 months. Some of these companies offer up to 4 months of paid leave. Imagine that. So again, if you have your choice between going with a union, right, and a company that offers up to 4 months unpaid leave, what you gonna do? You're gonna go with Google, right? Who has no unions. I mean, again, these are some of the tactics that employers are taking to avoid the unionization. All right, you guys can have a seat. So tell me, where are the that was Mr. Jackson, and also Mr. Mason.
That's like the fifth wall. Hey, just go ahead and leave.
Whenever I gave up on me, like, why are these people guys? I was
All right.
a little girl with me.
Mr. Pollard.
That was a girl with me.
All right, Miss Prince, now tell me.
Or both at the same time. Feel me? I'm 2 for 1.
Tell me, in terms of philosophy-laden firms, what type of approach do they take towards employment? So first of all, we know what type of turnover rates in internal promotion rates do unionized employers have? And unionized companies or organizations, are there high turnover rates or lower turnover rates?
615.
Thank you. In a unionized environment, there are lower turnover rates. Are there higher rates of internal promotion and transfers? Are there higher rates of internal promotion or lower rates of internal promotions in unionized environments?
Higher.
Higher rates, right? Okay. So in a philosophy-laden firms, what type of approach they take then to again mimic what the unionized employers have? How? What type of approach they take? Mr. Scott. What type of approach do they take?
There are two approaches. Well, actually, they are essentially one thing to unionization because of employment.
I said, what type of approach do they
I
take?
got you. Hold on one second. Two approaches and then show you examine these two approaches.
Next, Mr. Solomon, which type of approach does a philosophy-laden firm take? Mr. Solomon.
I got you.
What is it?
It says right here, hold on, wait. Philosophy-laden firms have generally taken a career-oriented approach.
A career-oriented approach. And what is a career-oriented approach? What is a career-oriented approach?
You're there for a while.
What is it? Tell me, explain to me what it is.
Full-time, non-probability employees.
What?
Probationary.
Probationary, again, make a distinction between these. Because a probationary employee, particularly in the context of a union, is again an employee that does not have protection for his or her job.
Right.
And in a unionized environment, a probationary employee, again, is one who's generally been there for less than a year. They don't have the type of protections that, again, a non-probationary employee has. So a probationary employee still is considered in some ways a what kind of employee?
They're assumed to be likely to spend their entire career.
No, I said a probationary employee is considered what type of employee, Ms. Prince? Non-permanent, but what type of employee in the context of what we talked about in terms of employment law?
Doctrine.
Well, there are two types of employees, right? Generally, one is a what employee? A at-will. Remember we talked about that? An at-will employee. An at-will employee can be fired for what? No reason, right? Or what? Or a good reason, right? A contract employee can only be fired for what? A good reason. Right? So again, a probationary employee is just like an at-will employee, all right? So that's but again, what is a career-oriented approach? What are some of the career-oriented tactics that non-union firms use?
620.
Thank you. Huh?
They provide substantial amounts of targeted training.
They employ a lot of training. What else they do?
And development programs to continuously upgrade skills and prepare employees to perform well in expanded jobs.
Exactly. What else they do? Are probationary periods shorter or longer?
That's shorter.
Shorter?
Actually, longer.
Longer. Do they hire?
They hire substantial numbers of part-time employees to provide a buffer for permanent employees during periods of fluctuating product demand.
Exactly. Those are key things to understand. All right. All right. Lastly, in a unionized environment, are there a lot of human resource programs or a small number of human resource programs?
Many human resource programs devised by non-union employees.
In a non-union?
Devised by non-union employers.
You said there are many or?
Many. Yeah.
In a unionized, is by a union employer? So non-union employers, you're right, have higher human resources expenditures and pay more human resource workers involved in the employee relations. Pay is more closely linked to individual, group, and organizational performance, with opportunities for high performance to result in higher pay than in comparable union environments. So again, in a unionized environment, you don't have to spend as much for human resource workers, because a lot of that is taken care of by the contract, by the collective bargaining agreement. But in a non-unionized environment, what they have to do is spend a lot of money basically dealing with issues that are not covered by the collective bargaining agreement, all right? All right. You guys can have a seat. Tell me about employment security in a contrast in employment security, which is the kind of the basics. And that was Mr. Scott, Mr. Solomon, and Mr. Jackson.
I mean, if you want to, I ain't gonna take the credit.
Who was that? Was Mr. Scott?
Yeah, it was Mr. Scott.
And Miss Prince.
It's solid. In the house, and it's Jackson.
Mr. Stewart, tell me about contrast employment security, which is the kind of bedrock for employment in many cases, how long you can keep your job. Contrast that in a union environment versus a non-union environment. So, again, in a union environment, what kind of employees do you have? We just talked about it. In a unionized environment, non-probationary employees are considered what? What type of employees? Ms. Vaden, help them out. Huh? At will, you say? In a unionized.
employees.
Contract. Why? Why? Ms. Vaden, are they considered contract employees? What do you do if you can create a union? Then what happens at the end of the formation of the union? Huh? You do what? Before you can sign it, you have to do what? What about the collective bargaining agreement? You have to do what? Negotiate it, right? You negotiate a collective bargaining agreement. So then, again, a person who's in a union, and if you're non-probationary, you are by definition what kind of employee? A contract employee. That means that you can only be fired for what? Good reason. That's right.
625.
That's right. It's all coming together now, right? So, is your employment secure or insecure?
Secure.
Is it secured or unsecured?
Secure.
Huh, Mr. Stewart? Huh? Who said that? It's you? You said that? Secured. It's like you kind of projecting your voice. I can't see your lips moving, but it's like, almost like a ventriloquist. Can you got like a little doll right there. I don't know what are you going to tell it you're talking. Absolutely. It's secure. It's secure. Right? So now, Ms. Vaden, you tell me, non-union companies, what type of employees do you have generally in non-union companies? What kind of employment situation do you have for them? Pardon me? What are they considered? Employees in non-union companies are considered what? At will, right? And that means that they can be terminated for what?
Good reason. Good reason, bad reason, no reason.
What is it, Ms. Vaden?
No reason or good reason.
No reason or good reason. They can even be considered, and as I said before, for bad reason, but that bad reason cannot be against the law. All right? So again, the idea is that the main reason why you want to go into an environment that's a unionized environment is because you're going to basically be able to get some type of employment security, right? So, so now let me ask you this. What type of, if you're in a unionized environment, Ms. Vaden, unionized now, if you have some type of complaint with what's going on in that environment, and if it's against the terms of your contract, what do you do? What do you do? How do you exercise your voice? Help her out, Mr. Stewart. How do you exercise your voice? Pardon me? Through filing a grievance, right? You exercise your voice through filing a grievance. If you don't like something in a non-unionized environment, how do you voice your concerns, Ms. Vaden? if you are in a non-unionized environment, how can employees exercise their voices?
It's Wednesday.
How do they address grievances? So what happens? So what happens? If you have a grievance in a non-unionized environment, what do you do?
Grievance.
Huh? Pardon me, what you do? You work for the night store, right? So if you have an issue with your supervisor, what do you do? So that, and if they don't give you a redress, they say, well, you know, I heard your issue, but, you know, I'm not going to do anything about that. What are you left to do? You may be able to go to court, right? But if you lose, then what are you left to do? And so if you don't get any type of redress that way, what are you left with having to do? Huh? Right. If you don't, in the context of, again, a non-unionized environment, right? You can either, as you said, go to the supervisor and try to take it up the ladder, right? And if you don't get any type of satisfaction, you have to either suck it up, right? Or leave. But in a unionized environment, that's the difference is that you have what, Mr. Stewart? You have rights. You have procedures for addressing those types of complaints. There's a whole list of things you can do. File a grievance, and the grievance, and filing a grievance, the shop steward is supposed to actually advocate on your behalf. Then you can get to a point where you can actually even involve the union attorneys to represent you, if it has to go before a board. And if the union doesn't take up all your rights, then you can actually go to, again, a board to report the union for them not taking up all your concerns.
6:30.
And then, thank you. And then if you, again, find an issue because you aren't satisfied with the results, then you can go to court. So, again, the pathway to court is a lot more tiered when you're in a union environment because you have a lot more protections. In a non-union environment, you can either, as you said, in some environments where, I guess in some cases, where there's an open door policy, right? And the open door policy is, again, what kind of policy, Miss Vaden? You spoke a bit about it. Maybe that's what they have at Nike. What's an open door environment?
A policy which employees have.
Open doors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Taking out lower level supervisors and managers.
So in an open door environment,
They have access to higher management.
what is that, Ms. Vaden?
If you have the issue of complaint,
You can do what?
you can take it up with lower level supervisors and managers.
Exactly.
To a higher level.
You can actually access both lower managers and supervisors and take it all the way up to the top, right? To Phil Knight himself, right? That's what the idea of an open door policy entails, right? And so some employees in that type of environment still feel that they don't have any due process rights. And that's, again, a procedure that makes sure that everybody's following the rules and they're not just basically, kind of making a decision about your employment, willy-nilly, right? Without any type of, cause or reason. So if it's something that doesn't have any due process rights, they can say, okay, Ms. Vaden, I'm going to hook you up because you know, you my girl, you go to Bowie State, right? But somebody else has said, well, you know, I'm not going to take care of you. You know, or some cases, you have some environments where they favor women in the outcome of their decisions, right? Because that is some environments that do. But then there's other environments in the outcome of their decisions that they, in terms of disputes, that they just favor men, right? So these are the types of, again, approaches to avoiding unions. All right?
That was a fast 5 minutes.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you guys have a seat. So again, what are some of the preventative programs? The preventative programs, Ms. Washington, tell me about some of the preventative programs that are taken by by employers in non-unionized environments. What are some of the activities that are taken to prevent unionization? Orientation programs. Quality circles. What else?
Management by objectives.
Okay. What else?
Information sharing.
What else?
Attitude surveys.
Surveys. That's a good technique. You want to always, again, survey your employees to kind of feel, you know, how they're feeling, right? What else?
Structural group interaction.
Structuring what?
Of group interaction.
Structuring group interaction. So having like group meetings, like group problem solving, exercises, group activities, taking people out to lunch, dinner. What else? And empathetic.
I'm sorry, management style. I can read. I'm sorry. Management style.
Okay. What else?
Client location.
So idea of what they try to do is locate the plant in a place that is more friendly to non-union environments. What are some of the places in the country that are more friendly to non-union environment? What are they called? What kind of states are they? They pass what kind of laws? I said in the country, man.
Oh my God. The Northwest.
Northwest, you said?
I'm just kind of saying it.
It goes back to something we've already studied. I'm asking you.
Repeat the question.
What states that passed what laws are most friendly to non-unionized environments? Blank, blank, blank. What's that? Right to work states. And what are right to work states? What does that mean? In a right to work state, you have what?
You have the privilege to do what you need to do.
Mr. Chompong. I tell you what, I see Mr. Ave is helping out. Why don't you go ahead and stand and help her out, Mr. Ave? What is a right to work state?
Right to work state is the states where employees have to join the union. So don't have to join.
They don't have to join the union, right? They can
They can either go to work as a regular employee or they can avoid
They can join the union, but they can. But if the union is existing in that state, there's no what shop.
Union shop.
There's no
Union?
closed shop.
You don't have to. Closed shop means you have
A
to.
closed shop means that what?
You have to join it.
You have to be a member of the union in order to work at that place, that shop, right? So
640.
again, Miss, finish up, Miss. Finish up. What are the tactics?
A small class size, outsourcing, and use of flexible employment arrangements, employee screening, supervisor selection and training, influential HRM department, desirable working conditions, high wages, good fringe benefits, job security, career advancement opportunities, grievance program, restrictions on workplace solicitations.
Solicitations.
I'm sorry, solicitations by union supporters, attitude surveys, surveillance, reports from operations and management.
Operatives.
Operatives and management. Loyalty.
What does that mean?
Are those like, aren't they just reports and kind of like surveys on a higher level people?
What is a report from operatives and management loyalists? A report. What do you think? Where do you work? You work at SunTrust. Okay. And so what would an operative be in SunTrust? How many tellers do you all have at SunTrust that work with you?
Well, at mine is like 5.
You have 5 or 6, right? And so what would an operative or a management loyalist be?
We don't do no management. No branch manager.
Well, it could be, but what would another example of an operative or a loyalist be?
Is this what they're saying a snitch? I didn't say that, but that's what they're saying.
Ms. Prince, go ahead and stand up and explain it to her.
Oh my God.
A whistleblower is just the opposite. A whistleblower is somebody who blows the whistle on the employer because the employer is doing something wrong. Loyal to management, that means somebody who is there listening to the grievances of the employees and reporting back to who? And reporting back to management. Saying, hey, Christine thinks that such and such and such and such is happening. So you may need to take care of her. Right?
A mediator, basically.
A mediator.
So you're basically saying
That's just
in order to manage, so whatever goes on with employees, they're talking about unionizing, they're talking about doing X, Y, Z, they'll go back and report to the manager.
Exactly.
Loyal to the manager.
Exactly. An operative is somebody who is a spy.
Undercover.
So it's
That's what a snitch is another word that's it is it's true. All right. So those are the types of things that are called preventative programs, and then you have management tactics that are taken during union election campaigns that are listed on table 7.2. So these are all the things that you guys need to be aware of. And again, one thing to also note is that sometimes when a union has been created, these tactics can then be employed after the fact in order to do what, Ms. Washington? Sometimes when there is an environment, so again, you have a union, and if a employer begins using some of the tactics that you've just outlined, what can ultimately that lead to? Ms. Prince, what can that lead to? what might happen after a year? By doing what? How would the union be dismantled? What would you have to do? What you would have to have a what kind of vote? Miss Washington, what kind of vote would you have to have?
I thought it was majority too. I did.
Miss Achompong, what kind of election would you have to have?
Is it a management campaign, representation election on the decertification?
Hey, what?
I said decertification. Oh, yeah.
A decertification election. Explain what that is.
When unions face periodic risks and continue as the bargaining agent, the majority may vote to oust the union after the election bar ends if no contract is in effect.
And it occurs when what?
More often in small units.
That lack local leadership and has no member involvement in union activities.
So again, these are the types of things that if you are a unionized environment, you have to always be on the lookout, because if these things begin to happen, meaning that all these benefits begin to, be showered upon the union members outside of the contract, then the union members might again begin getting some communications from the employers about ending a union, because it might say, hey, we're taking care of you so well, why do you need a union? Right? Why don't you guys just go ahead and do what, Miss Prince? Decertify the union. Right? And what type of vote? How many people do you need, Miss Washington? You need a majority. Absolutely. All right. So those are the key things you need to know in terms of this chapter. All right, so what we're going to do, it's now 6:47. We're going to take a quick 10-minute break. And then after that, we're going to come straight back. And every group is going to get a chance.